bones that make up the upper extremity that you need to know. The bone is the clavicle, the scapula, and then we have the arm itself, which is the humerus, the radius, the ulna, and then the hand. So let's go through what you need to know on the clavicle. Obviously, you need to know it's the clavicle. The only other thing is you need to know the two ends of the clavicle. The bigger, thicker, fatter end articulates with the sternum, so it's called the sternal end. The flatter end articulates with the acromion process of the scapula, so it's called the acromial end. All right, so just three things on the clavicle. If we look at the scapula, it should be on this side. We have, I'm going to turn around so you can see it from the back. We have this part running right down the middle, that is the spine of the scapula. We have a depression below the spine, and we have a depression above the spine. These are where certain muscles sit, right? So if we're below the spine, it's the infraspinous fossa. If we're in the groove that's above the spine, then it's the supraspinous fossa. All right? If we look at the spine, it does continue to a flattened point. The flattened point is the acromion process. All right, turn and look a little bit in front. We do have this little piece that sticks off the front of it. That is the coracoid process. And then we do have this little flat cavity here, and that is called the glenoid cavity. The glenoid cavity is where the head of the humerus articulates, right, to form the shoulder joint. The only other two things on here that you have to know are the borders themselves. Since this sits like this border is closest to the armpit, so this is the axillary border. This part sits closest to the spine, so it's the vertebral border. If you want to also call it the lateral border and the medial border, you can do that as well. All right, so that's the scapula. If we look at the upper extremity, we're looking at the humerus first. This is the head of the humerus, right? So the head is always medial. All right. So when you're looking at the bones and you have to determine if something is medial or lateral, the head is always attached in, so that's a medial aspect. If I turn them and look, there are two knobs. I've got a knob here, and I have a smaller knob there. The larger bump here is called the greater tubercle. The smaller one is called the lesser tubercle. You can see that we have a little groove in between the tubercles. It's called the intertubercle groove. If we slide down on the outside of the arm, we have this little bump here. That's called the deltoid tuberosity. The deltoid muscle attaches, right, and allows to abduct the arm. If we look at the bottom part, or the distal end of the humerus, we have a part that flares out here and a part that flares out here. Again, if I'm looking at the head of the humerus, right, that's medial. This is the medial epicondyle. Therefore, this then would be the lateral epicondyle. The bump here that is closest to the medial epicondyle is the trochlea. The bump here that is closer to the lateral epicondyle is the capitulum. Okay? So medial epicondyle, trochlea, capitulum, lateral epicondyle. That's it on the humerus. Now, if we look at our two bones that make up the forearm, which is this and this, hand again is sitting in anatomical position. How do we know which one's the radius and which one is the ulna? If we're looking at it, what I always say is, if we look at the pinky, how do I know that's the pinky and how do I know that's the thumb? Joints, right? Thumb only has one joint in there. The other ones have two joints in there. So, this is the pinky. So therefore, this is the ulna. I just always remember P and U, right? Pinky, ulna. Therefore, then this has to be the radius and the thumb. All right? If we look at the radius first, there's only a couple things on there that you need to know. Number one is, we can see the flattened aspect at the top. That is the head of the radius. Notice also that the head articulates with the elbow, or at least with the humerus. All right? You can see that we have this little bump that comes right off of it. That is the radius tuberosity. All right? If we slide down to the end, we have this little bump that sticks off of it. That is the styloid process. All right? And that's it on the radius. If we look at the ulna, again, we have a flattened spot on the ulna, right? That's the head. But the head articulates with the wrist. All right? So the heads are different between the two. If we look at it, there is a little teeny bump sitting there, so the ulna also has a styloid process. If we look up at this end, and you see that this makes kind of a C in terms of at the end of the ulna. That big bump there is your elbow, right? That's called the olecranon process. If we look at the bottom part of the C, which is down here, that is the coronoid process. All right, so the olecranon process is a big bump up top, or at least distal, and then we have the coronoid process below. And then the last part of this is the bones that make up the wrist. They are called the, anybody? Right, if you guys heard of carpal tunnel syndrome, right, it usually happens at the wrist. So the bones themselves of the wrist are the carpal bones. Do they each have a name? They do. Do we need to know their names? No. All right, so they just have to know them as the carpals. We have the bones here that make up the palm of the hand. They are the metacarpals. All right, so that's these 5 across here. And then we have the fingers or the phalanges. You can see that there are 3 different bones that make up the phalange. So this is the proximal phalange, this is the middle phalange, this is the distal phalange. The thumb, on the other hand, only has 2, so which one is it missing? Missing the middle, so it has the proximal and it has the distal. And that's it. So that's your upper extremity. So it's not too bad on that one. Again, don't forget, you got to go back and review the other ones because you will see them again.